Throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, food insecurity has steadily risen across the world. Although some may say that the rising level of food insecurity is purely coincidental and unrelated to the pandemic, I believe these two issues are very strongly intertwined. I will be examining several ways the COVID-19 pandemic has increased food insecurity, such as essential workers in food production who caught coronavirus in their workplace, people who had decreased income due to the unemployment as a result of the pandemic, and children who lost access to school meals because of a forced change to online classes. In this speech, I will argue that COVID-19 has played a significant role in increasing food insecurity across the world. The first way food insecurity has risen as a result of the pandemic is by creating a major disruption to the food supply industry by infecting many essential workers. According to CSIS, food industry jobs make up over 20% of essential workers who had to continue working throughout this deadly pandemic. For a majority of the pandemic, I too was an essential worker in the food industry as I worked at a very popular fast food restaurant. However, continuing to work in close quarters throughout the pandemic has affected the industry's ability to continue producing food at the rate required for our population. At my restaurant, we were constantly understaffed due to employees quarantining because of COVID-19. When examining larger food production, CSIS found that in the USA meatpacking industry alone, a whopping 27,000 people fell ill to the virus. This understaffing created an inability to produce food products at a regular rate, which has caused many producers to raise prices. An example of these raised prices can be found in the Agricultural Commodity Price Index, which is the price that farmers receive for their agricultural products. The World Bank has found that the Agricultural Commodity Price Index is 25% higher than it was a year ago. This raise in price is in large part due to the labor shortage in the food production industry, and its effects reach every consumer. Another way that COVID-19 has worsened food insecurity can be found in those who were unemployed because of the pandemic. I'm sure that all of us can think of at least one person who lost their job or lost hours at work as a result of the pandemic. The data corresponds with all of our personal experiences, as the unemployment rate in Wisconsin rose to an average of 3.9%, according to the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities. Between our personal experiences and the collected data, it is clear that the pandemic has caused a decent portion of the Wisconsin population to experience unemployment. This sizable chunk of the population is far less likely to be able to afford the basic amount of food needed for a person to thrive. As I mentioned before, food prices are rising because of COVID-19 related supply chain issues, and this, combined with lower household income due to unemployment of non-essential workers, is a dangerous mix. As college students, many of us can relate to struggling to afford what feels like an adequate amount of food. Unfortunately, this is unsurprising because the CBPP found that in our state of Wisconsin, around 177,000 adults reported their households did not have enough to eat. As a class in Wisconsin, this data shows that one or more people in our class are not receiving enough to eat. It has become regular in this pandemic to be unable to afford adequate amounts of food because of supply shortages that have increased prices and lowered household income as a result of increasing unemployment. Finally, I will be discussing the added pressure on households of affording food for students during online classes. The shift to online classes as a result of quarantining at home to prevent the pandemic has put the onus of responsibility on families to buy lunch for their children who could have previously used discounted lunch programs provided by the school. A staggering 85 million children in Latin America and the Caribbean who heavily relied on school programs to fight off malnutrition and hunger lost these vital programs when their classes moved online, according to the U.S. Global Leadership Coalition. In our area, a shift in food production such as this has caused the rate of child hunger in Waukesha to rise to a staggering 4% in the past year, according to journalist Rory Linnane. I would like you all to imagine for a second a child you know. It could be a cousin, a niece or nephew, a child you babysit, or your own child. And then imagine that child going to bed hungry without having eaten all day. It is not hard to be affected by this increased amount of child hunger that has come out of the global pandemic. Yet, the president of the Waukesha School Board, Joseph Como, has said that adjusting to this image is part of normalization in a world affected by the pandemic. Even in this blatant ignorance of the hungry children in the community, Como is admitting that the virus has in some way exacerbated the effects of food insecurity in our area. While I'm sure all of us are inclined to look for some form of rectifying this child hunger, it is at the very least clear that the COVID-19 pandemic has exacerbated the effects of food insecurity. By disrupting supply chains, lowering household income due to unemployment, and taking away food programs that children received in in-person schooling, COVID-19 is directly responsible for worsening food insecurity. Thank you all for your time.